Hi, everyone. I'm Thomas Howard. I'm one of the ICE technical marketing engineers here at Cisco. And today we wanted to be talking about a brand new feature that just came out in ICE 3.3 with patch 1. Uh, and these are the things we want to cover. First, we'll talk about patch releases, and then we'll get into the enhanced ICE and Duo integration for MFA. And we'll show you how that works with VPN as well as device administration, and then give you the resources and guides so you can actually go implement it yourself if you want to. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about with you all today is patches. You'll notice that we release patches every few months per release. The main thing is for those of you that are still on the ISE 2.x release, your final patch for ISE 2.x has already gone out. So there are no more updates, no more vulnerability fixes, no nothing in ISE 2.x. So that is it. So if you haven't gone to patch 10, you want to get it. It's the last one. And then start upgrading to ISE 3.0 because 2.7 is going to be end of life later this year. So keep that in mind. We encourage you to go ahead and always be upgrading and patching. And the one patch that we're talking about today specifically is ISE 3.3 patch 1, because this is the patch that this feature is delivered in. So if you just have ISE 3.3, you won't have this feature. You'll need to go ahead and upgrade to patch 1 to get it. And this is interesting. If you didn't know that we actually ship a lot of new features in our patches. The reason for this is because it allows us to give you incremental feature capabilities in these large ICE releases that only come, every 8 or 9 months. We're able to deliver these things much faster to you, so you don't have to do a major upgrade. You can just do a patch and get some of these newer features. And so you can see here in ISE 3.2, we have 4 patches out currently, and every single one of those patch releases has several new features in it. And so if you didn't know that that's something we've been doing in the ISE 3.x releases, go ahead and take a look at those patches and kind of see what are all the new things that we're including in there that we don't always get in the large releases that we do. So what we want to talk about today is obviously zero trust. And you use ICE to establish zero trust along with Duo to make sure that you can clearly authenticate that user and the device that you have and be able to enforce access using zero trust at the network access edge through segmentation. And then we can integrate with other security products in order to continuously verify your trust based on your network behavior and other things that we get from other security partner products. And if there is any change that's bad, we of course want to be able to respond to that and do a change of authorization and deal with it appropriately or quarantine the user or device. So in ICE, we do that. As you know, ICE is your favorite AAA Radius and TACACS server. It can be deployed as appliances in a highly distributed way all over the world in VMs, appliances, and in cloud providers. We control access to the network through our network devices, doing access control for all those endpoints as they're coming to the network. And then we authenticate them on the back end against different identity services. And we can even share that information about the authenticated users and devices out to different partner security services like Cisco Secure Products and many others that we integrate with. So this is kind of the whole breadth of things that ICE does to do access control and zero trust with these devices in the workplace. This allows us to see all the devices coming in, secure them, make sure our network is secured, and then of course share that information out with those other security services. And when we do want to authenticate our different users and devices coming in, we have a lot of different options. And whenever we authenticate, we usually use some kind of different factor for authentication, which is typically something something you possess, or something that's of your biological being or constitution. So these are all the different factors, and you can have different combinations of these factors to go from basically nothing to multiple factors. And this usually comes with some level of convenience involved, right? And typically when we think about doing network access authentication, we think about using the IEEE 802.1x protocol with a password, a username and a password, right? But there are lots of other ways you can do it. So back in the old days, we had open networks. We didn't have any authentication at all. Then Radius came along to help us do that. It's not uncommon to do MAC authentication bypass, or MAB, on the wired network, and sometimes even the wireless. But a lot of times you use WPA or multiple pre-shared keys to be able to do this. I call them zero-ish because MAB, that can be spoofed, and in the case of pre-shared keys, it's pre-shared, and you can have multiples, and multiple people can share the same one. So it's not really a strong identity for that. So that's why I say zero-ish. And then you get into single factors, which you have IPsec, and if you don't have a password, maybe you have a certificate, and those are all great options. Then when you can also get into this multiple factor area, so you can combine a certificate from a machine with a certificate from a user, and then you can also do MFA with something like Duo or any other MFA provider, where you can do passcodes, you can do biometrics. You have lots of different options, combine it with location, all these different factors that you want to be able to ensure the identity of your user, right? Then there's one more, something coming out. Security key is quite popular. I love using my security key, but if you misplace your security key, it can be a real challenge and make it a really, really bad, inconvenient user experience. The other thing I want to mention, you'll notice I called out some different things above MFA: hibernation, roaming, and idle or session timeouts. So the reason this is important is because when we're talking about a user experience, yes, MFA is great for security. However, if you have a re-authentication triggered because a mobile device tries to save power and hibernate and then come back up and then go down and come back up and go down, right? That could potentially trigger a lot of multi-factor re-authentications, and that could be really annoying to a user, right? Or if you're walking around campus or business park and you're roaming around different APs, you're getting re-authenticated, right? In addition to the normal idle or session timeouts that you may be getting from the network. This can be authentication fatigue on the user. So just because it's there doesn't mean you should always use it, or just be aware of the context in which you use it, right? That's one of the things you want to be aware of. One of the places that you will definitely want to use it is with VPN. There's lots of things in the headlines in the news all the time. This is one that I picked up a few months ago, and it shows that a lot of customers are deploying VPNs with these very typical standard user accounts that don't have very strong passwords. And my favorite one was logging in with the account test and password test. So if you are going to configure something this basic, this easy to crack, definitely you want to enforce MFA, or multi-factor authentication. That just, if you're going to do it, at least have that option there. You should definitely do better passwords. But if you do, MFA is the answer. That's what everyone recommends. And so to do that with ISE and Duo, basically you've got your different users that are going to come in, and when ISE gets that request, we can challenge the user for their password, which is great. And then we have the ability to forward the authentication request over to the Duo Auth proxy. The way this works is, today you would have to set up like a virtual machine in your on-premise environment, sitting next to or near ISE, so that ISE can forward this request off to Duo. And then it would be able to authenticate the user via Active Directory or some other authentication identity store in the cloud, or whatever your service provider is. And then if that passes, they can go ahead and talk to the Duo Cloud service to make sure that the user has their multi-factor device and that it's truly them. And once it's verified, we can let them in. So that's basically how it has worked for the past several years with ISE and Duo working together, or any multi-factor identity service. So what we've done in ISE 3.3 patch 1 is we've actually taken that Duo service and packaged it in a little container in ISE so that now we can talk directly to the Duo Cloud service using their native APIs. And we don't need to rely on that other VM authentication proxy. ISE can go ahead and talk directly to Active Directory as it normally does, synchronize those users and groups up to the Duo Cloud service. And then when those users come in and we want to trigger that second factor, ISE can make that authentication API call directly into the Duo service, and it will do the rest for us. And once we get the response back that they were truly authenticated with their multiple factor options, then ISE can let them in and authorize them. The one thing I'll mention today with this feature is it's only working with Active Directory on-premise, not with Microsoft's Entra ID, or formerly known as Azure Active Directory. It's only with on-site Active Directory. So this is one of the things we'll get into the details of the actual feature capabilities a little bit later, but I just want to let you know off the top that this is one of the main things that it requires. So one other thing to remind you of is that your IoT devices can't do MFA, right? So you need to make sure that just because you have MFA, that's a fantastic thing. You definitely want it. For some scenarios, IoT devices, they don't have fingers, they don't have phones, so they can't perform an MFA. So you still need to rely on other methods, right, to do that. And that's basically, what Gartner has said in some of these different articles is MFA is wonderful, but it doesn't solve all your security problems. You still need to go secure the rest of your network. You can't just do MFA and call it done, right? Hackers just know that, oh, okay, this is a smart organization. They've got MFA enabled, so now let's go hack into IoT devices or something instead, right? So you want to make sure you secure those devices. And I say this because you hear a lot about multi-factor authentication, all these different services offering it, but it isn't the silver bullet. You need to use an MFA product along with ISE on-premise to handle both the on-premise and the cloud-based scenarios. So Duo and ISE are extremely complementary in this way. And so if you're looking at deploying, if you think you can just do MFA with something like Duo, no, it's not going to work. You're still going to have gaps. So you want to make sure you have ISE as well. The same thing if you have ISE, hopefully all the things I'm telling you today, you realize you really want MFA. You're going to go do that as well. So very complementary is the point. And if you want to get started with Duo, I'm assuming you're at an ISE webinar because you already have ISE. Or you're seriously thinking about getting it, and while you're at it, you should probably get some Duo as well to do this cool MFA stuff I'm talking about. And you can get an account very quickly and easily at signup.duo.com. You'll get 30 days of the Advantage license to play with. And I tell you this because when you create this integration that we're about to show you, you must be an owner or an administrator of that Duo account, because in order to configure the Duo admin API to talk with ISE, you will need to be an owner in the owner or administrator role for that account. So you either need to work with your Duo admin for your organization if you don't have this and you want to try it, or if you want to do your own little proof of concept, then you're going to want to get this account, try it out, and then work with your Duo administrator to see how it works with your org officially. So like I said, once you do that, once you get your account, you can go ahead and you can log in to the Duo dashboard at admin.duosecurity.com. And then once you do that, you actually get redirected into a specific Duo site. It looks something like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and configure this service really quickly for ISE. So you can see here, when I log in, you can see I have that owner privilege. So I'm able to do the authentication API, or the admin API, I should say. We want to protect an application, and you can see there's a lot of different applications that Duo can secure. You can just search for the admin API, not the Duo admin panel, but the admin API. And then we also want the Auth API. These are the two different APIs that we need. And you can just click the protect button. I've already gone through and done that just to save a little bit of time, but really quickly, what it does is it allocates a couple of keys that we're going to be able to use. You just give it a name like ISE Admin API. Make sure that you check the read and write options. Don't uncheck them like I just did. Make sure you keep them checked and save those changes. So you need to read and write with the admin API. That basically allows you to sync your Active Directory users. And then we have the Auth API, which allows you to perform the actual authentication challenge request with MFA. So currently we have no users, right? And what we want to be able to do is go ahead and go into ISE and integrate those I keys and S keys that you just saw us generate for those two APIs inside of ISE. So the way that works is we flip over to ISE, and now we're going to go ahead and configure those things. And where that's located in ISE 3.3 patch 1 is under external identity sources. You can see we already have an Active Directory integrated into this deployment. And just real quick, take a look. You can see our AD is looking good. We have some groups, and we can go ahead and we can see we have these different groups here already configured. We've pulled them down so they're available for our different policies in ISE. So this is probably your existing ISE deployment, right? If you have all this stuff. But now all you need to do to enable the MFA integration is go into the settings, and you notice we already have one for the REST ID store for Azure Active Directory integration, and now we have one for multi-factor authentication. So simply turn that on, click Save, and that will activate the container to do those APIs. You'll notice it's a beta feature. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And what you can do now is go back to this panel, and you'll see you have two new entries, one for MFA, one for Identity Sync. For MFA, we now want to go configure those API integrations with ISE that we did inside of Duo. So let's give it a name. We'll keep it simple and say Duo MFA. Then now we get to do a bunch of copying and pasting. We go back and forth, copying these different keys and settings over. So we're going to start with the admin API, and basically we just do the token dance, I like to call it, where we copy these tokens over. First the host name, then the I key, then the S key, right? And then for the authentication API, do the same thing. I key and S key, and test it. All right, so looking good. So now that we have that, we know we have a successful connection, no problem there with the firewall or anything. Let's go ahead and just update our identity sync name and say, yeah, this is the Active Directory. You might have multiple Active Directories. This is the one we're going to integrate with. And these are the groups that we want. And I'll just turn this one off just to show you can choose different ones that you want to sync. And summary, here's everything we just configured. Looks good. Done. Okay. So let's take a look at our settings now. Good. We know we're configured. We can see there's our AD groups. Fantastic. And let's look at our identity sync. You can see we now have a dCloud AD that we configured there. And again, our AD groups that should be syncing. And we should be able to take a look, see a summary. If you've got multiple different Active Directories that you're syncing to, you can go in, you can resync them. Whenever you do an update, if you add users, change things, you might want to go in and resync them manually. And if you've got a lot of users, it'll say that it's pending there in the sync status. But if you go back into Duo now, you take a look at your users, there's our users. So you can see we have all these users that just got synchronized. ISE basically pushed them from Active Directory into Duo, so it knows these users, and we can associate these users with mobile phones or other devices to do the multi-factor authentication. So it's pretty much that easy. So what we want to do is perform an authentication now. So what we do is I want to show you our network devices real quick. So we have an ASA and a router that we're going to be using for our tests today. And you'll also notice that we've configured some network device groups to match on these. So VPN devices and iOS devices. And this is always really helpful when we configure our network access policies, right? So what we're going to do is first we're doing VPN. So we got this remote access VPN policy that we're just going to duplicate. Since we're configuring this for the first time, I want to just keep the old one intact. We'll do this other one. We'll call it RAVPN with MFA, and we'll put it above. That way it gets hit first before going on to the next one. And so we're going to modify this one so that we are able to do the Duo MFA. And nothing's changed with the authentication policy, but you'll notice there's this new MFA policy entry inside of the policy set now. And we can go ahead and give that a Duo MFA name. And what we want to do, since this is, we got to do Duo MFA. And just so you know, if the MFA fails, of course, we're going to reject the user. That would be bad to let them in if they got rejected from MFA. We want to associate a condition so that all of the VPN devices, if you're a VPN device, we want to perform multi-factor authentication on these authentication requests coming in, right? That way, it's really easy just to do it for all the VPN devices. Otherwise, we've got all these existing authorization rules. We haven't touched anything else. So if you got your existing policy, that's how easy it is to add MFA to your existing policy set. So now you can see I got my phone, and if I'm going to connect to my VPN as an employee, I got my normal password that I put in, and hopefully, if all goes well, boom, there it is. So are you logging in with the ISE Auth API? Yes, I am. And there we go, right? So that fast, we were able to do our multi-factor authentication for VPN. And now if you go and you look down, you can see we've got our employee that authenticated. We've got the authentication entry, and it succeeded. And we can see all the other normal details for our authentication request. And of course, we have all the different steps. And notice that latency. I love this new latency feature in ISE 3.3. This is really cool. It actually breaks it down. And you can see, you know, the users are really, really slow. And actually 7 seconds is actually pretty fast for an MFA response, because I have my phone right there. Usually I have to run downstairs. But you can see all the other normal things for doing this. So just remember that your users, you know, if they've got to run around the house to find the phone, you're going to see some large latencies here when they go to find their phone to perform that MFA. So just be aware of that detail when you're looking through your logs. You see these large latencies. That's what typically happens. And also, you want to set your radius timeouts appropriately in your devices to allow for that if you are going to be doing multi-factor authentication with something like Duo. All right. So there you go. That's how fast and easy it was to add ISE to an existing VPN deployment for multi-factor authentication with Duo. So what you just saw was the capability in the ISE 3.3 patch 1 release. And we're considering this a beta. You saw probably the little the beta keyword there when we enabled the feature. And what this means is we know it's the first release of this. We think it's pretty cool. Hopefully you saw it worked really, really well for VPN, really fast. But we know there's more to come. We know that there's other things that we want to do. So if you try this out, we encourage you to provide feedback. You'll notice that there was actually a link for beta feedback. When you turned on MFA, it goes to our ISE wish list page. So if you ever want to submit a feature request to our ISE product management team, you can click on that or go to this URL. They all go to the same place and submit it. But we already know that there's things that we want to do, which is here in this general availability list. So we're expecting in the next patch for ISE 3.3 patch 2, we're going to have these additional capabilities in that patch release to build on what I just showed you. Probably the one of the biggest ones I know is auto syncing intervals. So when I showed you that we had to go in and manually click the sync button to synchronize our list of Active Directory users and groups, that's a manual sync process. And that's not very convenient. You don't want to have to go in there every day or even every hour and click sync to make sure all your latest users that have been added to your your organization's Active Directory are synchronized into Duo. That's really, really annoying. So we know that's going to get got to get fixed and have an auto sync interval. There's other things as well, but if you play with it and you have some suggestions, please give us feedback on that. And then finally, we know that it's not enough to have just Active Directory, right? Entra ID, Azure AD, that's a really popular option, and being able to do MFA in other ways are also desired for some scenarios. So that's coming in a future release. Don't know exactly if that's going to be in a patch or in 3.4. We don't know those details yet, but just know that we're thinking about it, and provide your feedback so that we can incorporate your ideas. All right, so we just saw VPN, but that's not the only thing making the headlines, right? We have hackers coming into our networks in a variety of different ways. And I saw this article by Brian Krebs, who does some awesome tech security journalism. And what I saw that really caught my attention here was the headline. I mean, I've traveled the world, and I've been a tourist, and as I travel around looking at things, I was like, wow, I could have compromised my security just by walking around looking at a place. And that's the analogy that he makes here when he talks about when people hack into networks. He was referring to an article done by Hazel Burton on the Cisco Secure blogs. When somebody goes into a network, the first thing they do, right? And you've probably done this as well. You log into a device and you start doing show config, show interface, show route, show ARP, right? All these things like, where can I go? What am I connected to? What is connected? What's not connected? That's exactly what hackers do, right? They want to, once they get the first foothold, they want to find out, where can I go from here? What's next? And so that looking around with these basic commands is a giveaway ultimately. And the other thing that caught my attention is, we probably never thought that doing basic show commands was a security issue potentially, right? But it is it's kind of giving away where the hacker can go next into our network. And so even something as simple as show commands, you want to secure with MFA and device administration. And that's exactly one of the major features of ISE, right? Is device administration with TACACS Plus. So if you're a network admin, you can create policies in order to determine what devices you are able to control and which ones you aren't able to control. And so maybe on your security devices, that's managed by a separate security team. So you're not able to go in and change their security devices. And if you are a help desk admin, you're able to go in with limited capabilities to do some of those show commands, but you're not able to change the configuration, and you're also not able to go do anything on the security devices. That's handled by somebody else entirely. So, this is the kind of the basic concepts of device administration with TACACS. And TACACS is something that's been around for over 30 years now, if you can believe it. It is an old protocol. In fact, it predates HTTP by 3 years. And so it might be older than some of you on this call today. But I want to point out that they did go out a few years later, and they kind of formally they documented the TACACS Plus protocol in 1997, and then the same guys came back and really formalized it in 2020. So it's a protocol that's been out there. It's been around for a long time, and it really works. And a lot of network devices work with TACACS. One thing though is that because it was built 30 years ago, security, or should I say really specifically encryption, wasn't a thing back then. They were just happy to do to get it working and secure network devices. So your TACACS protocol and your Radius protocols on the back end aren't terribly secure in and of themselves. They still give away a lot of information potentially. And so you want to encrypt those, especially since people want to be able to do this from branch offices, and you don't know what's necessarily between your branch office and your headquarters or wherever your ISE nodes are located. And some people now even want to send their traffic directly over the internet, and that would be bad to do that over the open internet. That anybody could capture some of that traffic. So we're going to show you next month how to secure that traffic. That's something we think is a really cool feature that's also in ISE 3.3. And if you want to get started on it today, know you got to have ISE 3.3. And one of our TAC engineers, Eugene Kornichuk, has done an awesome document on it. So if you want to get right to it, he has the document. I've created a nice shortcut URL for you all to go take a look at that today. So you can go use that right now. Otherwise, we'll talk about it next month in the webinar. But otherwise, I want to remind you again, yes, if your network device supports TACACS or Radius, it can talk to ISE, right? These are old protocols, and it's not a matter of ISE supporting it. It's a matter of the network device having the capabilities to do this stuff. So again, any device, it doesn't matter what it is, if it supports TACACS or Radius, ISE can talk to it. So all the device administration can be done with any of these devices. And the one notable exception is, of course, Meraki, because everything is done in the cloud using their cloud dashboard. And you can control the administrator access levels in the dashboard itself. So that's one thing you might want to realize there. But otherwise, if we want to configure device administration in ISE, here's how it works. So we left off with our employee doing VPN authentication. And now what we want to do is go ahead and configure device administration. And first want to give you a quick kind of overview of what device admin looks like inside of ISE if you haven't seen it before. So we can choose what protocols we're going to use. And typically we just use the default device admin protocols. Again, these are not super secure protocols. Again, that's why you probably want to put them into a native IPsec tunnel to secure them. But you can create these different command sets that your different users are allowed to access. And when you do that, it looks something like this. You can say, oh, I want to permit show commands, or I want to deny other commands, depending upon the user's role. And pretty straightforward and simple. You can get really complicated. And you even have the option to say, just if I don't list it, just let everything go, right? So these are the basic options. And you can control these different profiles for what iOS privilege level they're going to get when they do log in. So in this case, we're just going to assign the user to a default privilege level 15 when they have access. And if we look at our existing policy sets, so just like our VPN, we have an existing iOS devices policy for our device administrators. So what we're going to do is duplicate that policy, and we're going to make it an MFA policy now, just to test it, and do a quick name change after we duplicate it. And now let's go edit that new MFA policy. And you'll notice nothing has changed with the authentication policy. We're not going to touch it. Looks like we're using our Active Directory users. And we're going to add that MFA policy just like we did before with VPN. Duo MFA, really simple name. Yep, use Duo MFA. And of course, if they fail, reject them. Otherwise, this time what we're going to do is, instead of VPN devices, anything that comes through here is probably going to be an iOS device. That's what we've said. And so for all of those iOS devices, we want to perform a multi-factor authentication whenever somebody tries to log in. Here's our existing policies. Don't have to touch any of those. Just add the MFA. And now we can go ahead and try it out. So we get on our terminal and we go ahead and SSH into our Cisco CSR and enter our admin password for our security admin password. And oh, looks like we got a MFA notification for that ISE Auth API again. And now we can go back and you can see we've logged in. We're now sitting on the command line. And we can go ahead and issue these commands, no problem. How about some other commands? How about configuration? Okay, that one's fine. How about an interface command? No interface commands allowed according to our policy, right? So that's device administration in a nutshell, right? Allowing our users to do certain commands and not others. And now we've added multi-factor authentication quickly and easily. And just to show you what that audit trail looks like, you can see, if you look here in the live logs, it shows you for each one of those commands authorizations, it passed or failed. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you the exact command in the live log. For that, you actually need to go into a report. You can see the command set, but you can't see the specific command that it matched in the command set. For that, you need to go into the reports and you need to go take a look at the device administration audit report. There you go, TACACS authorizations. Now you can see those same commands that came in. Some worked, some didn't. And which was the violation? Who tried to issue a command that they weren't allowed to do? Sometimes you really got to scroll over to see it. We got a lot of different fields here. All right, so, okay, so those worked, and then, they tried to do an interface command, and that failed. All right, so that is how you're able to go in and verify your users with MFA for TACACS device administration, and then actually audit what worked and what didn't and why. So if you see lots of failures coming in, you know to go take a look and ask that user, why are you trying to do all these commands? You know you're not allowed to do it. All right, so if you want to try this out, we already have a guide. Eugene Kornichuk's been really busy. He did another guide for us on the native integration with ISE and Duo. So it's out there available for you today. Go take a look at our ISE guides page. Use the tag Duo, and you'll see all of our available docs for Duo. We also have our device administration prescriptive deployment guide. If you want to configure device admin for the first time, we've got a doc for you on how to do that. And if you are a partner and you want to do a similar demo to what you just saw, we're currently upgrading our ISE. Currently, it's ISE 3.1 or 3.2 enterprise and security demo. We're upgrading it from 3.1, 3.2 to 3.3 to have patch 1 like this, so that you can do these exact same demos that I just showed you. Hopefully, that's going to be coming in February. We'll see if that actually happens. But the plan is to definitely upgrade that so that you can play with it as well. Again, this is only for partners or Cisco employees that have Cisco dCloud access. But we do get a lot of partners on these webinars, and I wanted to make sure that they knew that this capability was out there for them. The other thing is we have all kinds of guides out there for you. If you didn't know, we've got this great shortcut URL. And just use the little hashtag with whatever it is you're looking for, whatever protocol or integration or whatever, and it should work for you. It's pretty cool. It should jump you right to all the different things. I try to update that thing all the time with all the new docs and things I'm finding. So go ahead and take a look at that and see if you if we have what you need, really. And just to give you an idea, this is a list of all those tags available. And I keep adding them all the time. So there's probably even more by now, but that's what I was able to come up with for this. Last thing I wanted to talk about was we did mention earlier that ISE 2.x is going into support basically at the end of this year in September. So you need to upgrade to ISE 3.x hopefully really soon. And so in order to help you with that, we wanted to sweeten the offer with a couple of options for getting some free licensing terms. One for Essentials for a year free, and one if you upgrade to Advantage or Premier licensing tiers, you get 1.5 years free when you buy 3 years. So if this is something that interests you, because you know you need to upgrade from 2.x to 3.x this year, go ahead and go to cs.co/ISE-licensing, and you have all the details there on how to do that. So with that, I'll remind you all, we do look at your feedback. We love hearing what you thought of our webinars. So if you could, when you get the link after you finish the session today, go ahead and tell us what you loved or what you wish we would have done more or better, or what we can do in the future. And we'd love to hear it. And we've got all of our usual ISE resources that we love to share with you all here.